Welcome to the Agency Insider Show. I'm your host, Navneet Kaushal, and today we have a very special guest joining us, Lawrence Hitches, the General Manager of Studio Hawk, Australia's largest specialist SEO agency. Lawrence has been instrumental in growing Studio Hawk from a startup to a $13 million agency. Yeah, you heard it correct, $13 million agency. He's here to share his insights on agency growth, SEO talent, recruitment, and the future of SEO agencies. Lawrence, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks. It's a great introduction. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Lawrence, let's straight get into, of course, I mentioned 0 to 13 million twice, so let's get into that first. Now, how did you go from being a part-time employee to the general manager of a $13 million SEO agency?
Well, I'm past my man back about 7 years now. So initially when I got the job, I was hired as a entry level, we call them junior SEO specialist. And yeah, funnily enough, I was working 3 days a week. So not much time to learn during that time, but the days were very long. The work was very hard at that point. And I think slowly I scaled up and went 4 days a week and 5 days a week. But then eventually I was full time. And that was at a stage where we had about 100 clients, and we just landed one of our first big ones, a national retail here in Australia. And things started exploding. People were very interested in what we were doing because at the time, SEO providers weren't, in terms of the standards that we have today, they were very primitive. There was a lot of black hat stuff going on. We called them cowboys back in the day. And now, from that point, things really started growing. We started taking on new clients, more complex campaigns. So I was sort of forced to skill up in SEO very, very quickly, which is funny because it's the first agency job I truly had, but had to, get on the tools, learn to communicate with clients, learn how to do sales, learn how to do SEO all at the same time. So it was a very condensed, almost university of information about working in digital, but also SEO. And throughout that time, we started scaling up. And then one day, the founder Harry approached me and said, "Hey, do you want to be general manager?" And this was very out of the blue. And at the time, I just sort of said, "Yeah, why not? That sounds really cool. Let's do it." And at that point, I think we were about 30 people. And yeah, it's a big learning curve to step into that. But Harry really trusted me to grow fundamentally, learn on the job, and he trusted me to really guide the agency into the next stage of growth.
Okay, and of course, now you have played a huge role in Studios Hawk growth from a small team to a multi-millionaire dollar SEO powerhouse. So, can you walk us through that journey? And what was the revenue when you joined? And of course, now we know. And what were some of the biggest challenges in scaling an SEO agency?
Well, I'd see it as we went through a few phases. I like to call them, I always describe them as the valleys of death in business. It's quite a common thing where when you hit certain points of growth, things start really challenging you. So from that $0 to $1 million mark, and that's where I really joined the agency, it was, reflecting back, it was quite easy. I know that's sort of funny to say, like, business isn't easy. But at the time, we had a really good product offering. We're quite unique in the market. We're building a lot of good connections through networking and just doing a good job, which got us to $1 million. But then beyond that point, everything got 10 times harder. We had to hire people. We had to scale up our processes. We had to learn how to do better quality work. So that drive from $1 million to 10 million, which is that next valley, a lot of businesses failed during that point. Now, we didn't come out of that phase very perfectly, but we learned a lot of things along the way. One of the things that really helped us is just focusing on what we do really well, which is SEO. We could have added on paid ads. We could have added on all different types of services, web development at that time, but we chose to stick what we were really good at. And I think our clients really appreciated that they worked with a specialist agency. And then, when we hit really bad points in the agency where after COVID, we grew massively as well. That was a big growth spurt. So not only did we stack on a bunch of clients, we also stacked on a bunch of people. But beyond that point, we didn't know how to use that workforce and also deal with that client base. So it was great initially. We're growing really fast, but I always see it in business as a consolidation point. So that around that $5 million mark, we realize, we haven't focused on ourselves internally. We've been very external focused, but internally things are a little bit messy. So throughout that time, we focus a lot more on just our team. Like, how are we going to make our team really good at their roles? when we first started, people were just doing a whole mismatch of different things around the business. So myself, I was doing sales, we're doing client work, jumping over here, jumping over there, doing HR sometimes. But during that process, people were just stretched very thin. They were trying to do SEO work, but they had a bunch of other priorities. So we started segmenting and siloing out a lot of those responsibilities. So people would just focus on one or two things max. But it was very hard to do that at the time because we were very used to working on a bunch of things in the agency and working on the business. But we realized that, people just need to focus on what they're really good at. So we allocated people who were great at sales to do sales, people who were really good at SEO to do really good SEO. And then we restructured our agency around people retain and then people look at growing the business at the same time. And if the two work together really well, everyone wins. So on the retention front as well, we realized that we were getting a lot of clients on board, but we weren't showing the wins enough. We weren't reporting very well. We were doing manual reporting. There was a lot of just gaps in our agency where things were taking way too much time. And it's funny, this is all pre-AI phenomenon where people can increase the efficiency of their business using great tools and great automations. This is before that stuff existed. So we're doing quite manual things. We only really addressed that a couple of years ago, but realized the first 90 days of the client experience was very important to it, important to the client. So we focused a lot on that, building out a really great 90-day experience for our clients. And on the sales front as well, just getting a couple of people to focus on what they do really well in pitching the clients and doing the great audits that would get them on board and the ideas and the roadmaps that would facilitate a great campaign. So we did just a lot of sectioning and surgically removing a lot of the people doing different things around the business and just getting them channeled to the right thing that would make them succeed. It was quite an uncomfortable period. I think a lot of people, parts of the business that they liked doing, they weren't able to do anymore. So they felt, this isn't for me. And that was totally fine during that phase. But out of it, we boosted up and hit 10 million about 2 years ago. And now we're forging ahead in that $10 to $20 million phase of the business now, which is quite exciting, but it's presenting new challenges. That's the third phase of the business, which is now we've got a global operation, we've got a bigger team, we've got more diverse services as well. So we're learning to work together as different departments in different regions across the globe too. So that's the next learning curve we're experiencing.
How many people you have right now currently on your team?
We are in Australia, we're looking at about 60. In UK, we're about 20. So I think we're 100 all up if I was to count everyone currently, but it changes all the time. So it's very hard to pinpoint a number.
Right. Now that's impressive. Now, what were some of the key strategies that contributed to your rapid growth? I know you mentioned some, but were there some other strategies as well?
Well, funnily enough, it's investing in our own marketing a couple of years ago was a pretty important thing. So we were one of our clients basically who, thought, oh, we could get away with not marketing our business much, but we focused a lot of it in the last couple of years and made those investments. It was more expensive to do, but actually facilitated a lot of growth long term. So even doing things like our own SEO, our own Google ads, our own content marketing plays, investing in trade shows and different opportunities, doing a lot of branding work as well in the last couple of years has really helped us. So it's finally, as a marketing agency, not focusing on yourself because you're just so focused on doing it for the clients.
That happens with
you put that on the wayside.
Right.
All of us.
Yes.
You get so stuck with trying to do a great experience for clients that you just don't take care of yourself. So doing that, despite the investment at the time initially was quite big, it helped stabilize a lot of the growth we're experiencing. We were experiencing at the time like a lot of waves where business was really great and then it was stagnating for times. Now we've gotten to a point where we it's very predictable because our marketing funnel is quite tight. So that was one thing. Also, initially we had a really great growth structure around getting on new business. Yeah, on the inverse of that. So we had people focusing on bringing in new business, but we did that for a period of time, but we realized most of the gains is actually helping clients do great SEO. They'll stay around for a long time. So we created a KPI system around our team, which said, the longer that you retain clients and the more of them that are really happy, the more you can buy into that reward, which changed a lot of behaviors in the team where they sort of said, okay, if I bring on new business, that's great. But if I retain my clients long term, I'm going to build great relationships. The campaign's going to get easier because of the success. And I actually get bought into that system and I can progress through a KPI system. that rewards me for basically retaining those clients long term. Sounds very simple and like a no-brainer, but at the time we didn't realize where the gap was. After implementing that, it's finally enough, you see the behaviors change over time, that even from someone like myself, at the time I thought, it's a lot of hard work to retain clients, but seeing the effects of that come through the numbers and how it can grow based on just purely retention has been pretty incredible.
Now, as agencies grow, they often need to expand their service offerings. So, have you expanded your offerings, or they are still just SEO?
So I always see it as the umbrella of SEO has gotten a lot wider, or the tent of the SEO has gotten a lot wider. So it used to be just technical fixes, links, content as well. So we introduced content as more of a service a couple of years back. Then we introduced more things like development later down the line. But now we're looking at things like digital PR. We're looking at things in terms of more experimental marketing, CRO, that are expanding out, becoming almost sub-services of SEO. And how we look at organic is very different these days. We're trying to optimize for LLMs now, and that's what people are really focused on.
Right.
I don't think everyone's truly cracked the code, because the rate of change is so fast that next thing you know, there's a DeepSeek coming out, or next thing you know, Claude comes out with a new update, and it changes everything over again. So focusing on how we can develop SEO as a better offering, and keeping it quite standard in terms of, we can fundamentally fix your website, but these great little opportunities alongside of that we can introduce as sub-services to what we're doing, is what we're focused on right now.
No, so how do you decide which new services to add, and how do you implement them effectively as an agency when you grow up? Is it something you can throw more light on?
Yeah, so in terms of integrating new services into the agency, we've flirted with like different ideas of doing it, and we've tried testing it out, tried learning ourselves how to do things. But the best thing I've seen work is actually hiring someone who's done it before. That's the most efficient way of starting any new thing, is hiring someone who's got the right attitude, the right skill set. They don't even really have to have the perfect skill set for it, but they have to have a really good attitude and some more long-term thinking. So, when you hire people with not a lot of experience, it's all about what's next. But when you hire someone with a lot of experience, it's like, I've done that part and I can foresee what's going to happen next behind some of these services. So hiring great people into the business that have done things before, really supercharges that process. But besides experimenting with different tactics and strategies to try and build it yourself, I've always found that the most cost-effective thing to do long-term, but the hard part is actually finding that person initially, is, while it's great on the long-term effect, the short-term effect, you have to put as much time into finding that person as you do developing that service.
Okay, and the next obvious question is, how do you structure your service offering to stay profitable? Is it just because everybody else doing should an agency add, or how do an agency go about structuring them to stay profitable?
Comes down to really two things, and it sounds very basic, but it's the pricing structure and also how much things cost. And those two things are getting pulled constantly. As soon as revenue starts increasing, your costs start naturally rising up with that as well. And having to stabilize that is a battle. The only thing you really do at that point is increase your prices, but that you might cut your conversions at the same time. Now, everyone I've talked to is like, well, there's no definitive, you should do this at this point. It's all about what you can control. So looking into your client base and going, where are the time bleeds happening around your client base? And also looking outward and saying what people can tolerate in terms of a pricing structure as well. Now, it's interesting in Australia because our SEO industry is a lot more primitive than compared to the globe, basically in US, UK, and all around the world. They're a lot more developed and a lot more used to the pricing packages that you might see as part of SEO campaigns. In Australia, we really have to fight for those types of campaigns. It's gotten better over time, but just working really efficiently. And now in an age where people can just build their own tools, for instance, people can find ways to do things a lot quicker, which is really great. And then also the method of actually delivering those results can come through, hey, you can send a spreadsheet, you can send a report reporting up all the great wins. But if the clients don't feel that from you as well, and just building a really good relationship, I think that's where you can really leverage efficiencies in the type of campaigns you run. Where people trust you to do things, they ask less questions, and less questions means there's less time spent on calls. If there's less time spent on calls, there's less time spent doing things in terms of hours behind a campaign that aren't really that efficient. The more you can get an SEO specialist to just work on the website and optimize it, the better. The less you have to talk about it, hopefully, the more profitable the campaign will be.
Right now, you mentioned you worked on retention in 90 days, first 90 days of a clients. Now, what's your approach to client retentions versus acquisition?
So in terms of client retention, I see that as a result of whatever your product is, having a really good process. Now, it's quite unique in our agency where we have a model where our SEO specialists are the account managers. So one thing we realized as part of that onboarding experience or the client retention experience overall for our agency is the better we train our people to do SEO, the better they retain the clients long term. But to train people better, you need a lot of focus to do that. Initially, when I started doing SEO alongside Harry and Anthony, who's the GM of the UK, it was quite easy because I was sitting next to someone who was quite experienced. I could ask them basically any question. But as you get bigger in terms of an agency, that experience sort of dwindles. And if you have less experienced people training less experienced people, it creates this cascading effect. So you really have to, so we really put a focus around learning development as an exercise for client retention. So instead of just finding ways and saying to clients, stay with us longer, it's like, well, if you create a great specialist behind that work, the client will want to stay longer. So we invested a lot of time into just training people fundamentally. And this is where I think in a lot of businesses, not just agency, people go, training isn't something, it takes away time from doing billable hours or doing billable work. But the systemic impact of that compounds over time, where if you focus on training, and what we do is when we have a new person on board, they spend 6 weeks just learning SEO from the ground up. That's a lot of time spent not doing actual work, but it's focusing on being really skilled up and equipped and being tested and being challenged and doing role play and just finding ways of making them learn everything about SEO that would need to get a baseline and develop their skills from that point. We were just throwing people into SEO quite quickly, and a lot of people naturally picked it up, but we realized that people have different learning styles, and if different people were teaching them, it was creating inconsistencies in their training. So we allocate a lot of time to that first 6 weeks, which required a person to come in and train them for 6 weeks. So we got one of our team leaders who's really good at training and said, you're now going to onboard every single person that comes into the agency. It's a lot of expense to do that, but we've seen the long-term impacts of that be quite successful, where our client retention is down in terms of it's 12% better year on year ever since we started doing that. And all it took was really focusing on one person, focus on one role and one KPI to make the specialists that came into our agency really, really strong. So when they're released into the wild and working on campaigns, they have all the tools they need to retain that campaign.
Okay, so same goes for the account strategy guys or accounts guys you hire for clients.
Yeah, everyone. So if we have anyone join the agency, they're skilled up in our processes and the way we want to do things and learn SEO from the beginning. So even down to the fundamentals of how a search engine actually works, we want to teach that in, so that knowledge is all inbuilt. So when the time comes to it and a client asks them, they don't have to reference a book. They've got the natural, their brains are like sponges initially. So if they've developed that information, they can answer that question really quickly. And you'd be surprised what you can do in 6 weeks of training. So our 6 weeks of training means that they basically have the skill set of someone maybe being in 1 year of SEO, because all we do is just teach them SEO for 6 weeks. It's kind of incredible.
So do you also teach them client communications or just the SEO for 6 weeks?
Yeah, client communications, everything. So role playing, like we jump in a room and say, I'm a client. Talk to me as if you're the first person that's ever talked to me about SEO and is going to manage my campaign. What would you say in those situations? And people get nervous. I think I remember a time where I got tested on the same thing when I was starting working in SEO as well. And yeah, it was I was shaking. I was nervous. I couldn't express myself properly. But you do that a few times, you build a really good muscle for it. And by the time you hit 4 years or something, you don't sweat in those conversations anymore. It just comes out naturally because you've just done it so much. So It's like going to the gym. You just go in the gym every day, learning about SEO, talking about it. Then overall, you can suddenly just lift all these weights without breaking a sweat. It's the same thing when we talk about client communications or just SEO fundamentally.
Right. Now, uh, of course, scaling SEO services means hiring right talent. So you told us how you onboard for 6 weeks. Now, what do you look for when bringing in an SEO expert?
What I look for, looking for attitude is always worked really well for us. But again, I think in interview processes, people are always going to show the best version of themselves. They're always going to tell you what you want to hear. They're always going to say the right things. What's your long-term vision? Oh, it's to work for this company. That's great. And maybe people mean that, maybe people don't at the same time. But I found a way of, in processing out the interview steps where you can glean out any issues that someone might have or disalignment to your culture or the right attitude as well. That really helps. And being quite brutal about it. Hiring is not easy. I always say compared to sales, it's a lot harder because you're dealing with humans. In the sales process, the final thing is for someone to open up their wallet, pull out their credit card, and pay for your services. When you hire someone, you have to pay them a wage and also make sure you take care of them fundamentally, and they take care of you. And it's a very human relationship based thing. At least with the client that isn't happy with your service, they can just cancel it and you can give them a refund. When you deal with the people stuff, it either goes really well and they become a really great specialist or a great fundamental part of your team. But if it goes really badly, they might leave your organization. Both people have a bad taste in your mouth. So yeah, like I found really processing out the interview steps and being quite strict about it. It's very easy to jump into interviews and be nice to people. I've definitely done that before as well and been easy on people. But I think the harder you are on people in interview process, and the more they find themselves challenged by it, and they don't feel like it's too easy, that they actually earned the job, it finds the right people naturally. So we've got 3 steps. Initially, we just do a screen, say, hey, how are you doing? Are you a real person? Can you talk on the phone? Second step is a more formal interview where we actually challenge them on their SEO skills. So we'll ask them what EAT is. We'll ask them what a canonical is. And if they can't answer these questions, they may not hit the mark what we need for an SEO specialist. And the third part is some sort of audit or test. I find that works really well. I've seen people say, I don't want to do an audit to get a job. But if you don't want to do that to get a job,
Right.
well, it's going to be part of the job anyway. So you might as well give it a crack. And you'd be surprised, people with 10 years experience really struggle with doing an audit, especially doing it live in front of someone or presenting it. And someone with 1 year's experience can do 10 times better just because they have the right attitude around it. And they don't have to get everything right. We're not looking for the perfect audit. There is no perfect audit of a website. But as long as we get the good sentiment behind what they're trying to achieve and we see the passion coming through, that really shows who's the right candidate for us. Reference checks are a really great process as well. References usually tell you what you want to hear about the candidate too, so you have to dig really deep and ask them hard questions too. So the harder and more complex the questions you ask of the interview process, the more they don't even have to answer the interviews the interview questions that correctly, but how they handle it is more of what we're observing. Do they get frustrated? Do they get mad? Do they get sad? Do they get nervous? I don't mind nerves in interviews as well. I think being nervous actually shows that you care about how you're perceived by the other person, which is a fun. I was nervous in my job interview. I'm sure you've been in some interviews where you've been nervous too. I think that's a very human thing. So as long as they can still communicate and get it out, that's really important to me. But yeah, this just really honing in on the interview process has worked really well. And I think it falls by the wayside because you want to interview someone and just hire someone really quickly. That's great. But the results of that can be quite damaging if you don't pick the right person. So really taking your time with it. So I spent last year doing a lot of recruitment. It took a lot of my time, but I'm glad I did it. And then we eventually hired a recruiter in-house to do our recruitment from then on. So they could really hone in on the craft and be really great at it and give the interview process a lot of love. What I found is I was jumping between different things, but to be really great at recruitment and find the right people, it's a day-to-day job. I don't wish it upon anyone to have to, do 10 million things and then have to find the right person on top of everything else. That's really tough. So having a good concerted focus towards it will pay off long term.
Okay. Now, now speaking of growth, many agencies struggle with scaling. What advice would you give to agency owners looking to scale their operations?
Looking to scale their operations, well, when it comes to, I always ask what the goal is. When people have come to us for, just looking for advice. They've got an agency that's, smaller, maybe it's one person, maybe it's 5 people. I always come back to the question of like, what are you scaling for? Are you looking to be the biggest, baddest agency known to man, or are you just trying to get to this point? Like, what's in it for you long term? When you talk about scaling an agency, especially depending on what your processes are, if it's very people dependent, it's like I've just talked about. You need to have a rock solid recruitment process to find those right people that are going to build it with you. Very early on, if you have the right culture, and when we talk about culture, it can be quite a fluffy term. It's just, to me, it's like the attitude, the vibe, so to speak, of the people working in your business. If they're not keen to put themselves through a lot of pain initially for the sake of growing, and yeah, they'll get remunerated and they'll level up in their career by doing it. But if they're willing to rock up, stay a little bit later to scale that particular thing, that project, that agency, that works quite well. If you're looking to just sit back and not go hard, that's totally fine too. We talk about scaling, and also you see the pure investment of it as well. Things can come really easy. Sales can come quite easily as well if you've got the right product offering and you're really good at talking to people and convincing them to spend money. And a lot of people are great at doing that. But after that comes the investment. Like if you want to hit 100 million, there's no way you can do it without spending a bit of money. So I've seen a lot of the fallacy behind some of the agencies I've talked to is like, yeah, they do want to get more revenue in, but they're not willing to commit to that that investment behind their marketing budget. Even marketing agencies are hesitant to invest in their own marketing, which is ironic. And then just trust. Like you're going to have to find good people around you to scale your business with you. I've seen a lot of founders try and do it themselves. And if they do it themselves, they'll only hit a cap point. They'll hit a point where they literally cannot breathe. And the agency is wholly dependent on them existing, which is, I think if people are fine with that and they just want to keep it small, that's awesome. But if people want to go and be a big agency like ours, you have to find great people around you. And they won't be perfect. They'll have their flaws and weaknesses, but you can only strengthen those and invest time to strengthening those at the same time. I think just having a great culture fundamentally drives that scaling attitude, and having more people on board with that journey long term will assist that goal.
Now, interesting. Now, how do you maintain quality and consistency as you scale?
Having a really great CRM. So the part that I haven't talked about and a little bit more tactical is we didn't have a CRM like before 2 years ago. So we had no idea, one, where our leads were coming from, which is funny. And two, what was happening in the client base, NPS scores and things like that. So we're very strong on HubSpot. That was a great CRM for us to introduce. There's great CRMs all over the place. If you can afford a great one, if you don't have the budget to do, an extensive enterprise account, that's fine. There's, Go High Level, there's Zoho, there's Pipedrive, there's great CRMs involved. And that way you can actually just monitor every single contact coming through your business, whether they be a client, a person, a referral partner, any type of person that interacts with your business. They're categorized and they're somewhere that someone can look at and find, very easily and know what the communications are going on between that client and yourself. So, having a really great rock solid central database of that information. We were lacking that before and we were all over the place, but integrating something like that really brought everything together and made it easier for us to find information. And the quicker we're doing that, more efficient we got. And fundamentally, the happier people were with the experience they had from us as well.
So, and in terms of the managing clients after post sales, you said you also some project management tool also you implemented?
Yeah, so we use a mix of things. One, we just use a very standard spreadsheet. I think spreadsheets are really great. They're quite flexible. Everyone knows how to use them. For more complex campaigns, we use something like Monday or Notion to delegate out and manage the campaign. HubSpot for meeting calls and notes and quick bites, information bites about the campaign that we're working on. And then we use tools like SEMrush and Ahrefs to audit the campaigns at the same time. So we've got all the information linked up as well, and it's quite easy to access the information for our team. And on the client base, just having everything fundamentally draw down to like a spreadsheet, something that a link they can click and find the information they really need easily, gives a lot of comfort. And then, of course, we have like monthly reporting that comes out and monthly calls or looms that we send quite actively to just keep things moving on campaigns, because things change constantly. And if we're tracking them really, really well, we don't have many problems on our client base.
Right. Now, many agencies struggle with this scaling SEO services. Now, some prefer white label SEO instead of building an in-house team. What's your take on outsourcing SEO for growth for agencies?
I think it just depends on what your goals are. Outsourcing, SEO can be a great idea. The quality control, it's a more based on what you're trying to achieve. And if you're outsourcing and you've got a good purpose behind that and reasoning, and you're trusting a really great provider, it can work really, really well. Where I see it falter sometimes is just the communication. So just setting up some really great communication guidelines on who's doing what, as simple as that may sound, can minimize a lot of issues that come off that as well. If you want to build an in-house team, again, it's just going to be more expensive. And I'll just pick my battles. You can outsource great things externally that you're not great at, and just focus on one thing that you're really good at, and make that the premier part of your service. And secondary services, you can outsource or bolt on an outsourced service to that as well. I don't judge, as long as the quality of work coming out of it is fundamentally good. Wherever it comes from, I think people need to be a bit more blind to that you can get great quality of work from anywhere in the world at this point. And so as long as it gets results, no one should really complain. But often the problem with that is how it's communicated as well. So just keeping that very tight and actionable, and setting deadlines and meeting those deadlines, it can work quite well.
Okay. Now let's talk a bit about the talent and recruitment for an SEO, of course, and how to find the best minds. Now, SEO is a part science and, of course, a part art. Finding great SEO talent has always been tough. So what's your approach to building a high performance team? I understand one is 6 week coding, but besides that.
So besides that, I'll start from the beginning. What we do a lot of, and how I was hired, is just hiring people with no experience at all. They're a great base palette to work off because they have no preconception of SEO. They have no idea. It means that anything you teach them will be really great, and that's how I learned a particular style of SEO. On the more 2 year to 3 year front, you will find people that have learned SEO in a particular style, which may meet the style, or any sort of skill that may meet the style of your agency or business, but may not completely align. They do things a little bit differently, or your processes may conflict with things that they previously learned, which can be a little bit hard to unwire. Finding those people is actually quite difficult, because really great people in an industry are quite happy with their jobs, so they're not looking very actively. So on that front, utilizing recruiters can work quite well. And recruiters are specialized in just finding great talent. Whether you outsource that to a different agency or hire internally or do a contract basis, that can work quite well. And then also looking globally too. So something that we've expanded out in the last couple of years is not looking in Australia, because Australia's talent for SEO pool is quite limited. We're 30 million people compared to the rest of the world, which is 7 billion, very, very small segment. So if you cluster that down, there's probably only a couple thousand SEO specialists in Australia, and there's hundreds of agencies. So they're going to be quite limited. So we've expanded our scope. We've got a UK office, we've got a US office now. We're looking in all places. We're trying to recruit from different regions around the world and actually bring them over to Australia, which is great. Something we've done is a lot of relocation from the UK over to Australia, or hiring people in the UK to service to Australia. The US is a newer market for us, and they're big. They've got a lot of people. We're doing our junior strategy there. On the more higher end of people, again, it's more scale-up version of the more mid-tier person that you're looking for. So doing heavy recruitment over a long period of time. If you want to find great people that have 10 years experience, you're probably going to have to look for a good 6 months to find those people and build a bit more of a relationship. So at that point, I think people are quite settled in what they want in their career. They've done the hard yards. They want a very nuanced type of role and something that fits their style of work, which you have to be quite flexible about. But you can find great people just through, I think, going to conferences, LinkedIn, following great people, actively talking to people in the community, seeing who's available. maybe they work as a consultant externally from your business. Maybe they're hired in at a really great salary. Maybe you move them from a different country, but you want to find great people. It's the cost investment to doing that, the time to do that. And just allocating as a person to do that, or set a strategy to find those people, and tweaking and finding awkward angles to work with. And maybe they don't fit perfectly in your business, but they can provide value. So even the role that you might be looking for, you may have to morph eventually and say, actually, we're looking for something like this, and I think this person could do this segment of it. Maybe we should just get them involved in doing that portion of the role and covering up those gaps. Because if you don't do that, you're just going to slow down your business growth. If you're waiting for the perfect hire to come along, you're probably going to miss the boat on a bunch of different things. So at least getting something in motion at the end of the day that you're confident in, and you've got a good fallback plan if it doesn't work. In terms of recruitment, that's what it's all about.
Now, what separates an average SEO from a great SEO expert according to you?
I think it's just being able to break down a very complex situation like hreflangs or EAT or canonicalization or duplicate content in a way that anyone can understand. Because in SEO, we're living in this echo chamber of understanding these issues and these nuances. People outside this room, people outside the industry will not have any comprehension or care about what a canonical is. So being able to describe that really simply to another person, whether it be a marketing manager or your grandma or someone just random on the street, and get them to understand it really clearly and completely, and even just leave a smile on their face. I think that's what separates the average, maybe just good people, to the great ones, and then bring them onto that journey as well. Because SEO always sits in this weird, I always describe it as the cousin that you barely see, but they rock up at the, they come to the family event and everyone loves them. Or maybe they question like, what's that person doing? What do they do with their lives? I mean, you actually describe to people what you do with a lot of passion. That's where great SEOs really thrive. And linking it back to the business goals, I think when you start learning SEO, it can be all about, we're going to technically fix up the website. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. But then you don't tie that to what the business is trying to achieve. If the business wants more, a wider keyword base, or is trying to target a particular vertical, that technical audit probably doesn't matter. It's more about how do we reverse engineer our competitors on the SERPs to rank as equally as them, which may not even involve doing anything technical, or maybe building out a really great content cluster. So I think by doing that, by really reverse engineering and actually describing to clients, hey, this is how you beat XYZ competitor. Because fundamentally, business owners and business operators want to beat their competitors. So if you bring them along to that journey and tell them, hey, I'm going to do this because it's going to be a great result, not just, I just did a technical audit, here it is. You're telling the story behind what you're trying to achieve. People really buy into that journey too.
Right. Now, once you hire great talents, how do you keep them motivated and engaged?
Yeah, this is a good one, because once you build out a really great process of hiring someone, then you have to make sure they stick around.
Yes.
And I think as I've gotten older, I've realized that people's life priorities may change. You may have the perfect business in the world, and you get good cultural engagement, you get good feedback scores, everyone loves it, but then people leave. And I think that's an okay part of it. So even expecting a little bit of, people's life priorities changing, and they decide, I don't want to do SEO anymore. Maybe I want to do something else. And just being okay with that, I think, helps quite well, and shows people that, if you put in a really good time in a business as a career, and you do the right things and you get the results in, and you had the right attitude, and you show great cultural acumen, that's a really healthy thing. And eventually people will leave. So I think you can never have 100% retention, especially when you reach a certain size. But the ways you can actually tackle and retain people for longer, come down to finding out what they want to achieve in their life, and then, reverse engineering basically, how they can get there through your business. A couple of ways we're doing it is just providing a clear career pathway. I think for agencies, it's quite difficult to do that because it's really contingent on the growth of their next client. So what we've done is actually really gamified and laid out a progression structure where people start as a junior SEO specialist, and they rank up to an SEO specialist, and they rank up to a senior SEO specialist, and then a team leader. and then an enterprise manager, and then maybe they become a department role. So that's a good 4-year journey that someone can jump in on. And we've had great people do that over time, but now we've gotten very literal with that and say, hey, you can do that too. You just have to you just have to hit these steps along the journey. And I think as people have more predictability behind their career progression, they're a lot more settled and they don't ask those questions. So even just writing it down and sending it to them and showing them visually, this is a pathway you can create. Taking inspiration from a lot of big businesses, your Microsofts and Apples, they have very, very complex career progression pathways because they're big. You can take that to a very small scale. Even if you're a 5-person agency, you can put something down on paper and say, hey, you just joined this team with 5 people, but when we get to 10 people, you might be looking at a leadership role. And people get excited about that. Now, the key is if people are excited about doing something in the future, you have to find a way to follow through on that. So if you say to someone, hey, we want to build you to be a leader, you got to back that up. You can't just get lost in the day-to-day. You got to give them the training and the focus to do that. Your job is to grow the agency, but in the background, you need to be building up their leadership skills because you don't want to get there and then they don't have the skills to do that. So not only do you have to set the pathway forward for them, you have to find the development in that because you can give them the pathway, but if you don't give them at least some milestones to hit, complete this learning course on leadership, complete this training on SEO, complete this training on account management. People like learning. People buy courses all the time and kind of never complete them. I've been known to do that, but people like that progression. So we even built something like Hawk Academy, which is our learning platform. That distills all the information that we've ever learned about SEO into one platform that people can complete too. So we say, hey, do Hawk Academy before you start. And people like that little progression point even before they start in the agency as well. And then, I think beyond that, when you reach a certain point in your career, you're looking for different things. Like flexibility is a big one. I think flexibility is quite tough. Is a broad word. It can mean a lot of things to different people. Some people just want to start a little bit later in the day, and some people want more days at home. Some people want to go traveling. I think when you get to a point where someone's been around for 3 or 4 years and they've proven themselves and they're a great operator, you can provide that flexibility and it can be quite tailored to what they want, which is different for everyone. Some people have, kids. Some people have, they want to go traveling. So, if it's more important for someone to be at home at 3:30 to spend time with their kid, and another younger person wants to go to the Bahamas for 2 weeks and work from there, you're not going to offer that to the person with the kid. It's going to be a little bit redundant. So tailoring those pathways and finding unique. And it doesn't always have to be salary based. It can be something as simple as, hey, you want to go to a conference? We're going to pay for that. People find that like a nice way of progressing in their career, and they feel good about that. And then the final part is just recognition. So you can recognize people in different ways. People have different feelings towards it. Some people like it in private. Some people like it quite publicly. Asking people, hey, how do you want to be recognized for the great work that you do? Do you want a big shout out in front of the team, or do you want a small, nice note left on your desk? I think for me, people saying, a great job is all I need. But for some other people, they like the feeling of receiving an award. So catering those and tailoring those to every different type of personality. There's no one size fits all. There's a framework that you can use, like a progression pathway or structured onboarding or learning academies that you can put in the system. But eventually, you need to tailor that to the particular person. That's why having great HR involved in your business is a great thing. Fundamentally, I think HR is perceived as being something evil when it should be more about how do we get the team really engaged from the time that they start to the time that they finish. How can they just get a great experience overall, not driven by like crazy policies or bad things? It's driven by how do we make things a little bit better every day? How do we find like just unique opportunities to get up the team engaged? How do we create great events that people want to come to? And the strategy to get people involved and stay long term is all built by that.
Now, SEO landscape, of course, as we know, is constantly changing and very fast. How do you ensure your team stays up to date with the latest trends and algorithms?
Yeah, I think just actively talking about it every day because we specialize. The chat is always popping off with new things that are happening in the business. And then having that learning and development role behind the agency as well helps. So they can find all the unique things, distill it down to something actually practical. So I think there's a lot of noise out there as well. There's a lot of people saying, hey, this is the next big thing, but you don't know if it's true or not. And you have to wait a couple of weeks for it to actually filter out. So having someone really focused on that every day and bringing all the insights from the industry in can work quite well. And yeah, like, things like conferences work well because they get people engaged and get people thinking a little bit outside the box too. And making a concerted focus to go to those conferences and say, hey, what did we actually learn from this conference? It may be something, it may be nothing, but actually, putting down into words and presenting back to the team what they found. And then I'm always open to new tools. I think if someone comes to me with a new SEO tool every single day, they want to test it out. I'm quite open with that and saying, look, if you want to use it, we'll get a free trial. I'll pay for the first month. If you don't use it if you don't use it after that, it's probably not useful. So just allowing your team to experiment and having budget behind that gets them to open their minds a little bit and explore different areas. You can get quite stuck doing the same things in SEO, but if you're constantly challenging yourself with new tools, new opportunities, new little quirky ways of doing things, the journey basically never ends.
Okay, and so in your experience, what skills are most crucial for SEO professionals today beyond just technical knowledge?
I think beyond just technical knowledge, there's a big push in understanding how LLMs work in your everyday life. A lot of people are just not using them at all, not even using your basic ChatGPT. There's a lot of people that are hesitant to do that. Content writers and things like that, they're a little bit hesitant, and that's fine. But eventually, you're just going to lack the skill set I think you need for not just 2025, but 2030 and 2035 as well. And getting really good at automations, just learning the skills of using a make or an 8N now can really help your skill set. Learning how to write scripts, really leaning on these tools, these AI tools to skill set yourself to be able to build your skills for any career that you might do in the future. Let's say SEO does die eventually, it may do. So yeah, having at least a wide range of skills really help. And then eventually, being very open-minded. I think what can happen sometimes is people have been in the industry for a long time and they say, no, this is the way to do things. When the great SEOs are out there experimenting and proving if something's true or false or not. So having no ego about it and just going, I'm just going to test this out. If it doesn't work, that's totally fine. And just allowing people the space to experiment and just find stupid things to do and implement them. And if they work, they work. If they don't, no one gets hurt in the process.
Right now, in one of your talks, you talked about the difference between SEO in Australia and the US. How do you think first of all, what are the differences as per you? And then how do you think global SEO strategies will evolve in the future?
So the differences between Australia, US, and even just like the rest of the world is just a scale. Australia's scale is quite small compared. I've talked to people in the US and doing hundreds of thousands of dollars for SEO. You've got people in big brands, equivalent of a Walmart in Australia has probably just started building their SEO team. When the Walmart in the US, they've got a team of probably 10 people doing SEO every single day, which is enormous compared to us. So I think the scale and the propensity to actually invest in experimental activities behind SEO is different in Australia, and the usual leaning on Google Ads and things like that is quite prevalent here as well. People are a lot more hesitant to try something new, but what's interesting is the SERPs in Australia, at least I find, are a lot less competitive overall because no one's really investing the sheer amounts that you might in the US too. So there's still a lot of scope to grow, and you might find that as well. Things that happen in the US in terms of search results don't happen in Australia, so we're a little bit behind. AI overviews work sometimes, but I know it's been in the US for a while. Our SERPs look fairly different compared to the US, so even the competitive landscape, we're a little bit behind the times, but I think that this allows us to play a little bit of catch up. So in terms of global SEO overall, I think Google's going to care a little bit less about the technical nuances behind it. I've always
Right.
questioned whether href1s actually work long term, because I've seen great brands. I don't think I've ever seen a brand, especially a household name or global name, really nail the international SEO to the degree that which Google asks in their documentation. I think it's just more hints than anything. So building out those brands in those particular regions, if you're launching into one, you're probably going to have to put some heat behind it. But you won't have to exactly nail the technical end sometimes. You'll just have to nail the actual presence within that industry and make sure you're localizing the content, not just from a changing the Australian English to the US English, but actually building a fair amount of presence on even social media channels in those particular regions. Getting people to search your brand in those regions, I think, is way more important from a global SEO perspective.
All right. And uh, looking at how do you see the role of SEO agencies evolving in the next 5 years? I mean, with AI and everything.
It's weird because we had this debate in the team where someone asked, "Is SEO a viable industry in the next 10 years?" And to really break down that question, you can only make a really good guesstimation or an educated guess.
Right.
When even looking at Google Trends, SEO agencies increased in trend wise over the last couple of years. So I think it's popular to be an SEO agency now because we're probably the only people really at the forefront of understanding how connected we are to things like large language models. We're probably the most forefront people using them every day because they're directly impacting the share of traffic from Google. If it impacts the direct share traffic of Google, of course we're going to be recognized. So we're very adjacent to that industry. So we're kind of perfectly placed that if Google died tomorrow, people would start searching on something else, and we'd probably be very positioned to do that. When it comes to agencies, you're probably going to have a lot more niche down agencies. I've seen these trends in the US where someone's just focused on pest control or law firms. It might go a few layers deeper than that, like region wise, but this will be quite valuable. I've seen that trend in Australia for the first time, like someone who's just focused on legal firms in Australia, which is pretty surprising to me because
Yes.
it's not as big of an industry as the US, but it's still cool to see that trend follow through to this particular region. So I think SEO agencies may not call themselves SEO agencies in the next 10 years or 5 years. I don't know particularly, but there's some sort of optimization that we can do definitely. And there's going to be people required to do it because, you can't automate a really great strategy. You can kind of get the baselines of it, but you still need someone to do it. And you need people to be creative. I always see AI was created a good standard of doing great work at a base average level of a normal person around the world. But if everyone's at that level, if the standard's now here, how does anyone get here? I don't think AI can capture the true human experience of doing something unique and weird. It can give you some good ideas, but the human brain's pretty powerful, so it should win out most of the time. SEO is probably going to get a lot more creative. So you might see agencies have to invest more time into designing content or coming up with quirky ideas or doing things like digital PR, which is not as traditional and as boring as fixing title tags. It's quite a nuanced thing and a creative angle to take on SEO. But if you're trying to optimize for a search engine or an LLM, you've got to stand out. So doing things that stand out, and people on Instagram and Facebook and social media and TikTok do this really well. We may have to adopt some of those practices and think a bit more uniquely, not just create a blog about what is a law firm, but do something really special behind it. Do a press release, do a content strategy, do video content to actually rank in those search results.
Okay. Now, as more businesses bring SEO in-house, how can agencies continue to provide value and remain relevant?
I think when someone's in-house, they have to they're shouldering a lot, so they'll always need support from that front. When someone's in-house, they've got to handle the stakeholders of multiple different channels, and they've got to defend themselves against algorithm updates. So they'll always need someone to lean on. And if you're the only person talking about SEO in particular business, you're kind of stuck. You're kind of not not in a good position. If your CMO or CEO really understands what you're trying to do, that's great. But having an agency as um, a backup provider to do a lot of the legwork that you can't do by yourself, to soundboard ideas, that's always going to be valuable in any role. So I think agencies are pretty well placed to support those people internally. And I always look at the difference between in-house and agency. An agency, you got a lot of variety. You're dealing with a lot of different challenges on different scales. In-house, if something goes really wrong in the SEO front on a big website, and you're the only person that can fix it and resolve it, that's a lot to burden. So having at least some backup there is really nice, and agencies can always provide that backup. And if you have a good relationship between those two providers, you can do some pretty awesome things.
Right. With this, we came to the last section of our podcast, which is rapid fire questions. So I'm going to ask you
Cool.
round, and you're going to answer whatever comes first in your mind. So let me know once you are ready.
Yeah.
Okay. The one SEO tool you can't live without.
I would go SEO testing, but SEO gets as well is also very good. So I'm going to give you two there.
Biggest SEO mistake agencies make?
Not investing in their people long term.
Okay. AI generated content, good, bad, or inevitable?
I'll go good, but I'll just keep it at that.
Okay. If you had to rank content, links, or technical SEO, what comes first?
I'd go content first. Yeah.
Okay. A brand that's crushing in SEO right now?
I always like to think of Skims, so Kim Kardashian's body shape brand. I gave a presentation. I talked about how she's overtaken Spanx in terms of the keywords that they used to rank for in 2 years. It's an incredible SEO case study, and I would like to meet Kim Kardashian to understand what she what she planned out there, or it just happened by luck.
Okay. And an underrated SEO hack no one talks about?
I think I'm going to steal this one from someone, I think Steve Toff. They talked about how they would just take a competitor, put in the site command, and look for the keyword that you're trying to rank for. And basically whatever content they created, if they're ranking first, is probably content that you need to create. I thought those are just a really good practical tip to use.
Okay. And the best piece of SEO advice you have ever received?
Well, it's funny because I always feel like I give out advice these days, but I think it just sounded like it's the marathon, not the sprint. You could be waiting 2 years for results, basically. It's just the game.
Okay. And Lawrence, this has been an incredible conversation. Of course, tons of insights for SEO professionals, agencies, owners as well. Before we wrap up, is there any final advice you'd like to share with our listeners who are looking to grow their agencies or improve their SEO services?
Yeah, in terms of improving your services, it's all built by the people. You can automate probably a lot of it these days, but it's always built off really great ideas from people. So take care of your people, and they'll take care of you.
All right, that's a good advice. And where can people connect with you and learn more about your work?
Just LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn, is a really great place for everyone to communicate, especially about SEO. There's a pretty strong and healthy and active community. So Lawrence Hitches on LinkedIn. Follow me. Love to chat. Is it all good?
It just hanged. I can't hear. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for insights, Lawrence. And to our listeners, if you find value in this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to the Agency Insider Show. And if you are looking for top-notch white label SEO services to complement your agency offerings, be sure to check out Page Traffic. Until next time, this is Navneet Kaushal signing off. And Lawrence, thanks again for coming on the Agency Insider Show. Hope to have you back soon.
That's right. Cheers.